Are you a CRO or an SVP only relying on sales trainers to train your sales team? If so, this video is for you. Welcome to the enablement world. Hey everyone, welcome to Matt Chats today. I am sitting here with Carly Lehner, and she's an enablement expert that has written a really awesome article, and I'm going to let her talk a little bit about that today. But I wanted to bring her on because I think she's got some really good points, very valid growth, especially for our CROs and sales VPs. Like, if you're listening, we need you guys to pay attention because this is a huge aspect. So, Carly, welcome. I appreciate you joining me from across the pond. It's always great to have you here. So I'm going to kick things off. If you just want to introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit about your background today.
Yeah. So thank you, Matt, for having me. As you can see, I'm sitting in my F-14. I'm really excited about the Top Gun movie coming out, but it was supposed to come out in July and it's gotten pushed because of COVID, which I'm really upset about. But alas, I'll just still use the virtual background.
I love it.
So I'm originally from Portland, Oregon, but I've lived in London for the last 2.5 years. After I graduated, I started off my career in a sales development program in New York City. And after about 6 months of that, I quickly realized that I liked going to the training courses and actually training the new hires on my team more than I liked selling. So, but don't get me wrong, I really like sales. I mean, there's a reason why I'm in sales enablement, but I just don't want to carry the bag, carry the quota, carry that pressure. That's just not how I operate. So I spent about 2 years in a corporate L&D function at that same company. But mostly what I did was classroom facilitation and e-learning development. So pretty old school corporate sales training. I then moved on to an instructional designer role at a new company, and that team was very much modeled off of a corporate L&D function again, so not quite enablement yet, but the business would essentially request a training. It would then be assigned to a designer, and then we'd have to go make it. And I just really don't like that approach to training at all. I think you just miss so much when you come in after a request has been made. You miss the whole needs analysis part, I think. So I kind of found my way wiggling out of that box quite a bit. So I partnered really closely with our head of sales at that point and found myself to be kind of his right hand. We were pretty much the yin and yang. I balanced him out really well and vice versa. And then I worked really closely with the metrics guy. So the three of us were kind of unstoppable when it came to this weird sales ops enablement and sales team that we were building kind of just off the side of our desk. So I just remember telling my husband that my dream job would be to work closely with sales leaders and advise on training, process, improvement strategy, that kind of thing. And turns out I was actually talking about sales enablement and had no idea. So when we moved to London, I started off as a sales enablement manager at Axiom, and that's where I am currently. So I've been at Axiom for almost 2 years now.
That's awesome. And just to hear that experience from going the sales aspect all the way up to not knowing what sales enablement was, but joining into sales enablement, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's actually the same story that I have. I worked for Verizon for 6+ years, and having that transition of being sales manager and doing trainings and stuff like that totally developed into where I am today. So that's what really sparked my interest in talking to you and then reading this article of there wasn't a sales enablement program back then when I was in sales, and where does this come in today? So can you talk a little bit about the evolution of enablement from your perspective and where you've seen this grow and evolve along the way?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, corporate L&D functions, first of all, they serve a purpose, right? There are plenty of topics that I just do not want to cover from a training perspective that are perfectly suited for corporate L&D. But they weren't solving the problems of the business, especially for sales. So what I found and what I have found so far being an enablement is that I'm essentially what is called a rare breed, in that I understood learning and development principles, but also understood sales and salespeople and was commercially minded. And typically you only get one or the other. And like, I started to realize that's really rare. And so I think that's why sales enablement kind of started, I think. Sales training really consisted of former sellers retiring their suitcases and inheriting flip charts and leading live classroom sessions for, however many days. And there's so many studies out there now that say how ineffective classroom sessions are. And especially when you aren't focusing on like the retention and reinforcement strategy afterwards. And so, that's one way. If you have just the sales mind, like you're just going to do a classroom training. But if you have the corporate L&D mind, you might end up with an hour-long or multiple hours-long e-learning that sellers will absolutely hate and probably not find very useful. So enablement was born, I think, because there was just like this entire ecosystem around making a sales rep better. And it is so much more than just a 2-day long classroom training, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you said like it's an ecosystem, because it totally is. And that's how the entire, I feel like enablement, like we're working with so many different departments and trying to have the common goal of how do we enable the teams and the sales teams to really get out there and do their best and bring in money. So with that, what is the hardest thing that you've seen transitioning from an older company to make the move to hiring and investing in an enablement team versus their old school ways of the classic sales trainer?
Yeah, so I have found that training isn't always the answer. I used to get requests, especially because that's how we operated, like, hey, I need training for this.
Right.
And training isn't the answer all the time. Like sometimes it's just a simple communication issue. Sometimes it's a content discovery issue. So maybe we already have materials on that, in your content management system or, on Slack somewhere and it's lost. So hiring a bunch of trainers, I think inherently means that training is always the solution. And so the nice thing about an enablement strategy kind of shows that we're flexible and that training is such a small part of enablement. Like, you're probably going to talk to so many enablement peers in this series and like, it's so small. And so I think it's really important that hiring a bunch of trainers inherently means that training is always going to be the solution. And really that's not the case. And if a complex training really is the solution you need, I personally believe that there are so many amazing vendors out there in the sales training space that you can use and that are there to help. So I don't think it's necessary to have that role in-house anymore. And I think you need sales enablement, more generalist type of roles. And the larger you get, the more you can specialize. But I think it's just important to kind of get away from like the sales training team mentality.
So just to clarify, you're not saying eliminate all trainers, just redefine what all a trainer will do within the team, right?
Yeah. There are like going to be huge organizations out there that do classroom training every single week. They have like those new hire boot camps and like they're really effective and that's a part of their strategy. Right. They should absolutely still keep their trainers, but their role and remit might just look a little bit different.
Awesome. So you mentioned that the trainer now is a portion of the enablement team, not just enablement as well. Mm-hmm. What part of enablement do you wish or don't you wish that lived underneath that enablement umbrella that we all are kind of ambiguously living under right now?
Yeah. Well, so I actually have a couple answers to this. This was hard to think of at first. But one thing that I hated about enablement when I first joined Axiom was that we were the content creators because we didn't have a really well-established marketing team. Now we do. And so now I can just say like, that's marketing's job. And like, I was a marketing major, but that was like 10 years ago. And like, I didn't even learn about social media when I was in college. So like things have changed. So I'm not the right person to be making slide decks for client meetings. I know just as much about PowerPoint as the average person. So for me, I found that to be really frustrating when sellers would be like, hey, I got a client meeting. Can you make a deck for me? It's like, that's not the enablement that I want to be practicing. So I was really glad that we were able to push that off of our plates at Axiom, thank goodness. But one thing that I kind of wish was on our plate, maybe a little bit more explicitly, is communication to the sales team. So I've seen a lot of like our peers in enablement exclusively own the communication channels to sellers. So like everyone has to funnel through enablement in order to like send an update, and enablement basically acts like the scheduler of the salesperson's like non-selling time, which I think is super important. And I wish this kind of fell more squarely in the enablement umbrella. And more people were kind of doing that. But this is actually something I just decided to just like do today. Like I sent out something today, and I've gotten a ton of feedback saying like, thank you so much for this like digest of email, like all the different asks we've gotten over the past couple of weeks in just one email, because it's so hard to keep track of everything. So any way we can make sellers' lives easier, especially around communication, and there's so many different channels these days, like I think that's a big win for enablement. I think we should probably focus a little bit more on that.
Yeah. And I will second that motion, Carly. I actually just finished up a project where we redefined what our communication looks like to our sales team. So
that's awesome.
I can share that stuff later with you as well, too.
Please do. I need it.
So we talked about enablement evolution. What do you see as like the next step is that? And then do you see like the enablement function having a role within the C-suite or like a corporate ops function, or where do you see that living in the near future?
Yeah, so I think about this a lot because, you know, I'm the head of enablement. So I think, you know, what's next for me in 5 years, for example? Am I still going to be the head of enablement somewhere, or does that look bigger? So right now I report to the senior vice president of sales operations, who technically reports into our head of sales, but they more are pretty much next to each other at our executive leadership table. But I certainly think there's a path to the type of role, to like a senior vice president level role. If you come from enablement and have like also the ops and metrics experience. Executive leaders, like their language is metrics based. So, you know, I would love to see enablement as a C-suite function, but I really think we have a long way to go until we get there. Because we just need to nail the metrics and results side of what we do before we have a seat at that table. I think a lot of the work that we're doing is super valuable, but I think very few enablement teams are doing it so well that they can clearly articulate like their impact with, you know, cold hard metrics. Yeah. And I think that's what it's going to take for it to get to be C-suite, which I'm hoping, like, you know, people like you and I will get there. Right. That's what we're doing. But I think a senior vice president level role is very doable. We're already seeing VP roles in enablement. So SVP is definitely doable for us, I think.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely always a goal to aspire to, and keep pushing and working up towards those goals for sure.
Yeah.
So my all-time favorite question, and I ask this of anybody, no matter what project I'm on or whatever I'm talking about, if I ever want to know more, I love this question, and I thank my director for giving it to me. But if you had a magic wand, here we are, imagination time. If you had a magic wand and could do anything with no limitations, how would you structure your ideal team for your company?
Wow. That would be quite the luxury because it's just myself, and I have an associate who is absolutely amazing. But if I was able to hire more people, I would assign an enablement rep to each of the commercial cohorts in our business. So we obviously have our BDR function, we have an inside sales function, we have enterprise sellers, but even within enterprise, like we have such a range of experience levels, which I think could even be subsections of enterprise. We have client success, and then our talent engagement team is pretty similar to like a solution engineer if you're like in the SaaS space, right? And so I think it's really important to become a subject matter expert on all aspects of whatever cohort you support. And like, so then you own what their onboarding content is. You own what their content mapping strategy is with marketing, and you're pairing with the solutions marketing team, that sort of thing. You know, the messaging and the language they should be speaking. And then I'd give ownership for, you know, each person on that team for various programs or systems or things like that based on their strengths. I still think someone should own all of onboarding to make sure it's cohesive. But I think whoever creates that onboarding content needs to be like the SME and whatever the audience is for that onboarding. So that's kind of how I would do it. If I could, you know, hire a team of like, you know, 6 more people, I think that's how I would structure it. But I know there's so many different ways to do it. So I'm super curious to see all the different responses to this question, because there's really no like perfect way to do it, I don't think.
Not at all. Yeah. I think that's the awesome part is try it and see what works. And
yeah, exactly.
So if you guys do have ideas on how to structure out a team, thread them below. We'd love to see exactly how your guys' teams are structured. Helps other teams and practitioners, you know, see and align how teams are being built out day to day. So definitely cool. Carly, I seriously cannot thank you enough for the time you gave me today. I know it's at the end of your day, middle of mine, but you brought some amazing points. And you know what? It's funny to see this evolution of enablement has always been there, but it hasn't always had the title of enablement. So, and I know as we're starting to define these guardrails of what enablement functions own and don't own and stuff like that, what if any other like nuggets of information that you have that could help develop these teams or help others encourage as they're creating their teams along the way?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think focus is just really important. There's a reason that, you know, after executive buy-in, writing a charter is like one of the most important and crucial steps to establishing a sales enablement function. It's really easy to become order takers. And one of my colleagues in marketing calls them like squirrel tasks, just like you're running all over the place trying to find like, you know, valuable things to do. And I think we forget about the bigger picture of like why enablement was formed to begin with, or, you know, what the company priorities are for the year. We finally wrote a charter this year. It got approved. And then like 3 weeks later, COVID happened and kind of all went out the window. And I didn't rewrite my charter, and now I'm feeling really lost. Q2 was great. I mentioned that in my article, but Q3, I'm like, okay, we have a lot of work to do. And like, I don't know exactly what to tie back to in terms of priorities and things like that. So my guiding light has become a little bit hazy, and I really should take my own advice here and kind of like rewrite my charter and reevaluate what success looks like given this current environment. But I would just say, like, pick something and stick to it and make sure that your executive team like agrees that that is important. So then when you get those requests for like, hey, can you make something for me like by like tomorrow, you can say like, is this more important than this thing that we agreed upon at the beginning of the quarter or of the year? So stay focused.
I love that. That's so awesome. Carly, thank you again. I sincerely
thanks for having me.
Everything. Yes. Again, Carly Lehner from Axiom, head of enablement. Check out our article. It's threaded below in the comments. And if you guys have questions at all, please thread them below to either Carly or myself. So thanks, everybody. I definitely appreciate you guys joining into Matt Chats, and stay tuned for the new series, Bridging the Gap.
Thank you.